Good day, I am Camila Abraham Lucero, a second-year criminology student, Section A. Today, I will be discussing the lessons of Module 2 in CA 200 or Institutional Correction. Now, here are the following coverage of lessons in the Module 2 to be start off in the history, philosophy, and objectives of imprisonment and the development of prisons. First, we have the Sing Sing prison. Second, the Auburn System. Third is the Pennsylvania system. Then we have the Age of Enlightenment. Now we have the personalities behind correctional institution. We have Caesar Vicaria, Marquis of Vicaria Punesia, Caesar Lombroso, William the Conqueror, Enrico Ferri, and Clifford Shaw. So before anything else, first is I need to read my presentation before I gave my word of discussion. Now let's proceed to the history, philosophy, and objectives of imprisonment and the development of a prison. So during the 19th century, the philosophy behind imprisonment changed. Prison became viewed as more than an alternative to brutal corporal punishment. It was seen as redemptive and capable of changing the individual within to become better people. So in this philosophy in the imprisonment before, so during the 19th century, there was a change in the development of imprisonment all over the world, from having this brutal method into having this redemptive. So now let's proceed. So the justification of all punishment, and specifically imprisonment in goals and houses of correction, was to deter and punish. So in the imprisonment, their main is to deter crime, to prevent it from happening, to prevent criminals in committing crime, and of course, for those persons who commit crime or who violated the law, there are space in the imprisonment for them to be punished. So the use of imprisonment in the late 70s was seen as a more humane form of punishment than earlier corporal punishment, but it was not necessarily viewed as reformative. In the late 18th century, the prison was increasingly used by court as a place of punishment, eventually becoming the chief means of punishing serious offenders. So in the 18th century, the prison was the place for punishment for those people who have committed a crime. Now, the use of imprisonment subsequently spread worldwide, often by means of colonial empires that brought the practice of countries with no indigenous concept of prison. So the empires are the ones who brought the practice of in the countries about this prison, about the concept of prisons. Now, by the early 21st century, a majority of countries had abolished the death penalty. Abolish means to stop, or they take away this kind of a punishment which it is very inhumane or degrading. So some of the countries in the 21st century, among them the majority, have abolished the punishment of death penalty. And imprisonment was consequently the most severe form of punishment their courts could impose. So the court only imposed punishment in prison. So they abolished death penalty in practice and in law, and they only use imprisonment as a severe way for punishment. Now I will proceed with Sing Sing Prison. So Sing Sing Correctional Facility is a maximum security prison located in Ossining, New York. It is in use since 1826. So it is one of the oldest penal institutions in the United States. It is also among the most well-known in the country, especially notable for its harsh conditions in the 19th and 20th century. So Sing Sing Prison is very well known in the United States. It is because of its harsh conditions way back in 19th to 20th centuries. So why is prison called Sing Sing? So Sing Sing's name comes from the Indian phrase sin sink. It meant stone on stone. In 1901, 3 years after Edison introduced the electric chair at Sing Sing, the town changed its name to Ossining, so people wouldn't confuse it with the jail. So the people in town there changed the name of Sing Sing to Ossining so that they will not be confused of its name as a jail. So originally known as Pleasant Prison. So Sing Sing Prison is also known as Mount Pleasant Prison. It was constructed in the village of Sing Sing on the east bank of the Hudson River, North New York City. It was designed to provide additional prison space and to replace Newgate Prison. So it is being designed to provide a more additional prison space so that they could replace the Newgate Prison. Construction was undertaken in 1825. So it started the construction in 1825. This was done by the convict laborers under the supervision of Elam Lins, warden of Auburn State Prison. So the warden of Auburn State Prison is Elam Lins. He officially became head of the new prison when it opened in 1826, though it was not completed until 1828. The initial facility had 800 cells, so Sing Sing Prison has 800 cells, and it was constructed in 1825, headed by Elam Lins, though it was not completed yet in the year 1828. So, the prison population rose in the mid-century, resulting in more construction. So, in the mid-19th century, there are a rise of population in the prison that leads to more construction. So the prison population rose in the mid-19th century, resulting to more construction. The 4-story complex, soon 6 stories, and the prison eventually housed more than 1,600 inmates, because most of the early convicted criminals traveled by boat to Sing Sing. The phrase up the river came to mean going to prison. So with the rise of population in the prison from 4-story complex, now they have the 6 stories. And they can accommodate 1,600 inmates. So from the phrase up the river, it means going to prisons. Okay. So Lins resigned as warden of Sing Sing in 1830 and returned to Auburn in 1838. He was asked to leave the prison a year later after the death of a prisoner who was punished severely for feigning illness. Despite this record, Sing Sing rehired Lins in 1843. So after 1 year, Lins, the warden of Sing Sing prison, resigned, but then again it was being rehired in 1843. So whippings and flogging were commonplace of punishment at the Sing Sing prison. So from the picture that being shown, we could say that this kind of imprisonment has the harsh condition, which it is very inhumane and degrading of kind of a punishment to those inmates. Frequently used was the cat o' nails, a cruel whipping contraption whose lashes were often tipped with metal or barbs. It was finally abolished by the New York State legislature in 1843. So, in 1843, this kind of punishment was being abolished in the New York State legislature. In addition, while Lind was warden, inmates were expected to refrain from making noise, which included talking. With the advent of the electric chair in 1891, Sing Sing became the notorious for its execution because they used this kind of a punishment, which is the electric chair. Although the electric chair was developed at neighboring Auburn, almost all executions in the state were carried out at Sing Sing until 1963. Thomas Mote Osborne, who developed his penology theories while voluntarily incarcerated for a year at Auburn, served at Sing Sing as warden in 1914 to 1915 and 1916. More reforms were instituted under the Louis Edward Lawes, who served as warden from 1920 to 1941. He notably improved the living conditions within the prison and allowed inmates to participate in sports. So, the reform of Louis Edward Lawes, there was a change in the living conditions in inmates in that prison. So, in 1901, the residents of Sing Sing village changed its name to Ossining. They wanted to distance, if not dissociate, the town from the notorious prison. For that same reason, in 1970, the state renamed the prison Ossining Correctional Facility. So from Sing Sing prison, now it is named Ossining Correctional Facility. The residents changed its name in order to distance and not to disassociate the town from the notorious kind of prison that Sing Sing prison before have been developed, which is the harsh condition, notorious kind of punishment. Next is we have the Auburn System. So, Auburn Prison is located in Auburn, New York. It is opened in 1816. It is established a disciplinary and administrative system based on silence, corporal punishment, and congregate group labor. In architecture and routine, Auburn became the model for punishment throughout the United States. So throughout the United States, they use Auburn system as their model in prisons. Maybe because this kind of system has established a disciplinary and administrative kind of system. Auburn briefly implemented a 3-level classification system. Under it, minor offenders, labored in workshops during the day, and retired to separate cells at night. Serious offenders alternated their days between solitary confinement and congregated work. So for those minor offenders, they are the labored workers in the workshops in the imprisonment. So only during the day they work in the workshops, but at night they are separated in cells. But while those have serious offenders, they are in the solitary confinement and congregated work. So Auburn originally used congregated cells, but in 1821, Warden William Britton borrowed the concept of solitary cells from the so-called Pennsylvania system. So Auburn, they used the congregated cells, but then Warden Britton borrowed the concept of solitary cells from the Pennsylvania system. So Britton designed a unique of 5-tiered cell block of 2 rows single cells placed back to back in the center of the building. So this Warden Britton and the Auburn system has designed a unique kind of cell block. This cell block of 2 rows of single cells placed back to back in the center of the building has the measured of 3.5 feet or 1.06 meters wide and 7.5 feet or 2.3 meters high. Doors face other walls lined with grated windows that provided indirect light and air. This pattern of small inside cell blocks was later adopted by the most state prisons in the United States. So this kind of cell block that is being designed by the warden of Auburn system, which is the Warden William Britton, have been used in the United States prisons. The most hardened criminals were placed in solitary confinement without work. So those are only for those who have most hardened criminals. After numerous suicides, instances of mental illness and attempted escape, the governor of New York terminated the classification system and the experiment in solitary confinement. Subsequently, all male inmates work in congregated shops by day and returning to individual cell at night. So these male prisoners or offenders, they work in the congregated cells. Then at night, they go to the individual cells for them to rest. So females first committed to Auburn in 1825 were legislated to an attic and excluded from regular work and exercise. To ensure that inmates did not corrupt one another, Britain's successor, Elma Lines, enforced a quasi-military routine of absolute silence, strict discipline, and economic productivity. In response to balls, head-shaven inmates dressed in striped clothing silently march in lockstep formation and to and from their cells for meals and work assignments. So these inmates has been disciplined on how they will act according to what is being implemented by the prison system. So example, they march silently, going on to meals, then going back to their cells, doing their work assignments and everything. So eventually, overcrowding made the silent system unenforceable, and Auburn system of discipline deteriorated into corrupt and lax routines of harsh punishment. After the Civil War, the spirit of reform withered and contract labor was no longer profitable. Despite the demise of the ideal system, Auburn remained the model for nearly a century, primarily because it had been inexpensive to construct and maintain. Now we have the third, which is the Pennsylvania system. So the Pennsylvania prison system was encouraging solitary confinement of the inmates. So Auburn system, they use congregated prison cells. Now here in the Pennsylvania system, they use the solitary confinement for inmates. The Pennsylvania system was responsible for the influence in penology for over 100 years, and it was the forerunner when it comes to model corrections. So Pennsylvania system is one of the forerunner when it comes to modern corrections. So the Pennsylvania prison system was designed in a way that it would keep the inmates separated from each other all the time, including periods when they were working, so they would not get distracted, and this was considered to be impeding their repentance. The idea for this system was in the beginning developed by the Philadelphia Society for alleviating the miseries of public prisons, and the most vibrant members here were the Quakers. In 1929, the Eastern State Penitentiary on Cherry Hill in Philadelphia applied this so-called separate philosophy. Prisoners were kept in solitary confinement in cells 16 feet high and nearly 12 feet long, and 7.5 feet wide, or 4.9 by 3.7 by 2.3 meters. So in the Pennsylvania system, they use solitary confinement for inmates in order to separate those inmates by cells. So an exercise yard completely enclosed to prevent contact among prisoners was attached to each cell. Prisoners saw no one except institution officers and an occasional visitor. So these prisoners only saw those officers in the system and those occasional visitors who visit them. Solitary penitence, however, was soon modified to include the performance of work such as shoemaking or weaving. The Pennsylvania system spread it predominated in European prisons. Critics in the United States argued that it was too costly and had deleterious effects on the minds of the prisoners. But the Pennsylvania system was superseded in the United States by the Auburn system. So, here are some of the pictures in the Pennsylvania system. To be start off with the Eastern State Penitentiary. So these photos are credited to the Library of Congress. So these are the Eastern State Penitentiary. Second, we have a decrepit stairwell at the Eastern State Penitentiary. Okay. And lastly, we have the picture of the empty hallway of the Eastern State Penitentiary.